This is your before and after story, where your first steps towards a new life-changing career begin. Southeastern College can take you there. We offer in-demand hybrid and online programs with hands-on training, led by in-field career professionals, and career services to put you on the path to a rewarding and fulfilling future. This is where your transformation begins. Southeastern College, your future is bright. Visit sec.edu to get started.
If you love entertainment, current events, and Hollywood, don't miss Creator to Creators, hosted by the filmmaker Meosha, known for the Shudder hit documentary Horror Noir and the acclaimed film Anatomy of an Anti-Hero, Redemption. This show features interviews with filmmakers and creatives from around the globe. Join the fun with guest celebrities and gain valuable insights. Subscribe now and follow Creator to Creators.
Hi guys, welcome to another episode of Creators to Creators today. Today we have a special guest.
Hey everybody, I'm Nathan D. Myers.
And I'm Delitha Myers.
Welcome, welcome. Thank you guys for coming on.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Absolutely. I love going back to the beginning. I always say at the beginning, charts our trajectory in life, right? Our little habits we pick up along the way follow us into our adulthood. Tell me a little bit about your childhood. How did you guys get into the entertainment world?
Yeah, so I started out in the sticks in East Texas, where it was a small town, and I lived on a huge farm. For me, a huge farm. I mean, we had like 100 acres, and I was an only child, so I was left to my imagination. I watched a lot of 90s, like Kids Incorporated and Mickey Mouse Club. And so that really influenced me in just wanting to perform. And so growing up, I would perform for my parents. I would bring them into my room, and I had a trundle bed, and I would pull the bottom trundle out. So I had like a 2-tier stage. And I would write my own musicals, and I had like a synthesizer keyboard, so I'd make some beats, and I would come up with lyrics, and I would perform my heart out. And so that's how I grew up. And then finally we moved to a bigger town in late elementary school, and they just had a great arts community, and I had some amazing teachers and great friends who we just created together. We did theater, we did choir, and so that's how I got my start.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and I am a preacher's kid.
Me too.
Oh, that's cool. PKs. And when I was little, my dad was moving around a lot. He was kind of trying to find his place, I think, in ministry. He actually got his start as a barber and and doing surgical hair replacement, which is, an unusual thing. And then he got a very serious call into ministry when I was in early elementary school. And so we bounced around a lot. But like Delitha, I was in the woods playing with sticks a lot and left to my own imagination. We didn't have a lot of money or toys to play with. And I think because of that early imagination stimulation, I spent a lot of time drawing and painting and playing with Play-Doh. And, that was... And I was not terribly interested in sports and things like that. So I spent a lot of time doing visual art and reading. In junior high, I got involved in acting a little bit and had always been singing in the church with the family. And so there was always a music component to life. And then by high school, I was doing musical theater, and I was that kid who was in the show. And then I would take my tap shoes off and stick around and help paint the set post rehearsal, and got interested in scenic painting. And so when people ask me today what I'm doing, I say, well, I'm an actor who's also a scenic. And so acting often kind of implies that you probably sing. Most actors probably sing. So yeah, I've been one of those Swiss Army knife artists for a lot of years, and that led into the film space in 2005. And film for me was just a new idea post having done a lot of theater and live theater, and just kind of got bitten by the film bug, thinking about how music and visual art and acting and story and everything really kind of came together. And I got super fascinated, and I haven't really looked back. I've done less and less live theater since those years, or since, and then I've dragged Delitha along into the film space too, a little bit to her chagrin. But
how'd you guys meet?
Yeah, we met back in 2002, and we were both hired as musical directors for a children's musical theater summer camp. And so he was off singing and playing with his brothers because they were in a boy band and they were touring. And so the director, Deborah, I had just moved there to Fort Worth from New York because I'd gotten my degree in musical theater. And what do? You go to New York so you can be a Broadway actress. But I didn't like living in New York, so I moved back to Texas. And within a month of moving back, I got hired at a regional theater where I got my equity card, which is, the stage union.
Nice.
And then I met Nathan. And so Deborah had said, we usually have this guy named Nathan do the musical direction, but he's off with his brothers touring the nation. And so we do need a musical director. So she hired me. And then a couple of the weeks of July for their tour got canceled or pushed or something. And so he did come, and she said, you know what? He's coming now. And I really think you're going to like him. And I did.
it's true. She told me the same thing. And I had called, just say, hey, our tour's been pushed. Is there any chance I can still come to camp? Because camp's just fun. And so I was like, man, I really want to be at camp. And she told me the same thing. Well, I hired this girl, but I think you're really gonna like her, come to think of it. And that's where we met. We met under the chandelier at the Scott Theater in Fort Worth.
Wow.
So,
Amazing. Amazing. And the rest was history, as they say. So when did obviously you're both so talented. When did you guys kind of come together and say, let's create together?
that's a great question, because it really, we were living separate creative lives for a lot of years.
Okay.
Even she was like she said, an actor in a regional theater, and I did maybe one project with Casa
Yeah,
Manana across
graduated.
10
Yeah,
years.
one time.
Otherwise, I was touring with the guys, or I was working for Kids Who Care, the other children's theater in Fort Worth, or I was working on a movie project somewhere, or um, I had my own stuff going on, and she did too, and then and we had a mutual appreciation for one another, I think, and I think I lived a little bit vicariously through her at times when she's doing theater and I was not, because there's kind of that. I think a lot of people who act appreciate that feeling. Like, you'll go watch a show and you'll go, I want to do that.
Yeah.
I want to be up there. I want to get on that stage. I want to experience that. And so sometimes it's the envy factor for artists is real. Like you see people performing and you're like, I wish I could do that right now. It looks so much fun. And so I lived a little vicariously through her in some of those years. And then I was just kind of investigating other things. Film in particular kind of took my interest in 2005, and that was right in the middle of her decade of acting, and
Nice.
that film project was one where a friend said, "Hey, I want to cast you in this movie," and I went, "Oh, okay, yeah, I've always wanted to do that, but I don't live in Hollywood, and I haven't really pursued that." And we read the script. The script was not great, but it was one of those times when if you think about it, it's pre self tapes, it's pre cell
Yeah.
phones with cameras, it's pre that era. So if you had an opportunity to be in a movie or something like that, you probably jumped on it because it
Hmm.
was it was likely the only opportunity to get some demo reel or clips. And and that was actually the justification at that point. She said, "Well, you need to do that just so you can get the demo reel out of it." And that was kind of the beginning for me. I got involved and did the movie and had a lot of fun doing it. And like on all movies for me in my career, I'm booked as an actor, but I'm probably, if I'm not in costume, well, maybe even if I am already in costume and I have 30 minutes or an hour or 2 hours to wait,
Mhm.
I'm probably over in art department doodling around, painting something or
Nice.
trying to help, just because I'm fascinated by that too. So
I think though how
Yeah.
we came together, there's two parallels for that. One is, we had a daughter, and
Oh,
so like our world changed when that happened.
yeah.
And so right after I had her, I went back to the stage and I was in a show and I hated it. I
Hmm.
was so I just felt so guilty being away from her, and you they've changed the rules since this time, but at that moment, Equity had the rule where you had 2 days where you worked 10 out of 12 hours for
Mhm.
tech, and that's a long day when you have a 5-month-old at home.
Oh, yeah.
Um, and so the guilt was real. And so after that show, I said, I'm not going to do this anymore for a while. And then I haven't. That was the last time I did that. That was a while ago. And so that in that moment, I had a pivotal shift. And in that same kind of moment, he had this moment where he was brought back because he was trying to step away from film in that moment when we had that
Mm.
daughter, that one. And but he was whipped back into the film space, but he
Mm.
didn't know what project it was going to be. And so we had these two parallel moments that really kind of brought us together. Um, and
yeah, I
yeah,
I know that it was probably inevitable. It's funny, like I always wanted to do something with her,
Right.
and we had opportunity a couple of times to do some musical theater um or perform together because we would perform at church occasionally, like we might sing a duet or we might lead worship together from time to time, or with a group that was leading worship. And so we had these kind of opportunities to work together at different points, and I think that satisfied a little bit of it. I always wanted it to be more than that as I got more confident with the idea that we're going to make movies and things like that. But
Mhm.
that was 2014, and yeah, we had just had the baby, and I was feeling really cynical and jaded. And as a
Mm.
filmmaker, I bet you probably relate to this feeling to some degree where you can get on a project with people and the energy of that project and the people that you're hanging out with can drain you.
Oh, yeah.
And 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 it's not why you got into film, you or into the creative space, and you hope that you'll get involved in something that will stimulate you and fill you with a lot of creative bliss. But film can be rather ragged environment sometimes. I came off of a big project recently, and everybody was like, "How was it?" And I said, "That's the saltiest group of film pirates I've ever worked with." And and you feel that way sometimes. And I was feeling that way in 2014, and started praying about what do I do? I've had a baby. Do I make a career change?
Hmm.
Do I need to just stop all this nonsense and go get a corporate job and go get a soul deadening job? Do I need to go do that? The irony was I was feeling a little deadened in my soul after having done a lot of the film stuff too. I was
Yeah.
just it was ill motivated, some of it. I was bouncing around just kind of taking whatever work I could get. And so I got really honest before the Lord and just said, "What do you want me to do?" And if I and I've never had such maybe a moment of disclosure and clarity where I got a very clear message, which was, "I want you to sell your house, sell your truck, and I've got something for you to do." And it terrified me because I'm a PK, and I was like, "Oh no!" It was like,
Yeah.
is the Lord going to put me in a pulpit somewhere, or am I going to have to preach? Because I have this kind of construct, if you as you expectation of how things might look. But
Right. Right.
um, to make that long story shorter, we that all culminated ultimately in this kind of opportunity to work together, where we sold the house, we went away, we prayed about what to do for a while, and then 6 weeks into that season, uh, and I had job applications out all over the universe, but nothing was popping, nothing was happening. And then I looked at her one day and I said, "You know what we're doing, right?" She said, "Oh yeah, I know. We're making a movie." And we went back to Texas. We had left Texas for a minute, just I think for the need for a change. Um, and but the call was really clear for both of us after we sat and prayed about it for a while. It was
It's great.
go get back into the space. Don't leave the film space. Get back involved. Make something, but keep me in mind.
Mm,
That was really the impetus. And so and Deletha and I, um, we conceived that project together. We have borne it across its entire life cycle at this point together, and it's been challenging and uh, difficult.
Yeah,
But
and it's been a process. I mean, so we started making the movie, from the writing standpoint
hmm
when we had this, baby. I think we started when she was about 8 months old writing
Oh,
it.
wow. Wow.
She's 12 now.
Wow.
It's taken this long. And like we've had these two kids this whole time, right? We've had our movie
hmm
Aria Appleton and we've had our own daughter, Aurora. And
Yeah.
they've gone through lots of similar cycles, similar things, like
Wow.
mhm.
we post-production hit, and we're having to raise her just like we're having to raise, at that moment, like a 4-year-old.
Yeah.
Um, she's had some tantrums, so does the movie.
That's incredible. I mean, wow, talk about I love that about like you got up and you didn't question, the call. Like I feel like, when God does give us these instructions, it's like, do we, we don't see down the road and around the corner, but it's just that's where that faith comes in. It's like, okay, God, I trust that you got us and you made this amazing project that I feel like is so important for today's time that we're living in. There's not much nowadays there's just kids can't really like there's not really clean, good faith-based projects out there that is funny and that has, talks about these things, but you know, it's so refreshing to see something like this that you've done in this time because the world is crazy right now. So thank you for making something so great.
Yeah, thank you for the affirmation. We asked ourselves at that point, well, what? Because we weren't given it what to make. It was just go make something, and that's the beauty of the free will that God gives us to go and take what we have and create. And I wish there were more people in faith based who felt that freedom
Mhm.
to just set themselves loose and free, and because I know many people in the faith-based market, and they would admit, because I've been on panels with them when we're talking about writing and
Mhm.
the motivation behind a project, and many of them will say, well, no, we look at the market, we
Mhm.
think about what the market needs, we think about what people will actually buy. We figure out who we're going to cast in advance, and we try to go target those actors because we think they'll help sell that project. And so everything is a contrivance, like a developed product for the marketplace.
Mhm.
And there's not necessarily anything wrong with that, uh, but there are people who would argue that that's not art.
Mhm.
That's something that's a factory manufactured product or something like that. And so, um, and I know for our part, we as artists just wanted to make something that was good. Like we don't know what it is. We don't,
Yeah.
what is it that we can make that would be really good? And we sat and talked. The only thing we really talked about was what are some genres and movies we really love, that uh, that might be interesting if you if we could show them to our kids, and we were talking about Mean Girls and Ferris Bueller and
Yeah.
campy public school movies at some point, thinking these are kind of guilty pleasure movies for ourselves that we grew up with, but we can't show that stuff to our kids in good conscience right now.
Right.
And when they're adults, they can look at that if they want. Uh, but that was kind of the first conversation about what would we make? And it's like, well, if it was us, we'd probably make some comedy, and it'll be some campy public school movie, or
And let's add music because we love
yeah, let's
musicals.
do a musical.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how it started, and the length of time that it took us to make what we did. Well, that's a story within itself. But
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
I
all
mean,
the
it's amazing because like you
all the
guys wrote all six original songs, right?
Nathan right here, he did.
Holy moly, amazing.
Yep.
yeah, thanks. That was an afterthought too. It was like, well, let's how can we make this as fun for ourselves as possible as artists? It's like, how do you make this as fun for us? And we know kids and young people will eat that up. So
Yeah, and Aria, our main character, she escapes into her mind when she can't really handle reality. She just escapes into that fantasy.
Mhm.
And so it was a great tool to be able to insert some big musical numbers that I love without it stopping or hindering the story. It just kind of adds to in a very natural way.
yeah,
Yeah,
and some story elements people might expect to see told as narrative actually are told through song, or
nice.
and so some of those story components and transitions and things that you might normally see, as part of a traditional narrative sequence or something, are told in the music.
Hmm. But a lot
That's
of the themes
amazing.
in the movie too, like cyberbullying or,
Hmm.
using technology for good, those things just happened organically. We didn't sit and go, what are
Like what we're gonna
teens and
talk
tweens
about.
dealing with right now?
Yeah.
It just came about naturally. And now we're so thankful that it did because it is such a hot topic and it's
Hmm.
really relevant.
Yeah, in fact, we jokingly at that point, because we wrote it in 2014, started shooting it in 2015, posted it in 16 and 17, and then went to festival,
Nice.
um, and then put it back in post in 2020, right as the pandemic just imploded and knocked everybody's legs out from under them for a while, and it took 2 years to get it reposted and back
Mm.
to festival. And so it's been a long process for us, and working on a shoestring. But the ultimate process of getting the music installed, and the the component parts of that were very naturally or they were organic.
Yeah,
They were
Yeah.
that's
organic.
our word for the day. Organic.
They were organic. And
I love that. I love that. It was organic. What was the most surprising or like joyful moment during the making of this movie?
hmm, wow, there's so many. It was so much fun. So much fun to make. People say never work with kids and animals, and
We
I
did. We did both.
we did both, and we had so much fun. Uh, I I'm not sure I agree with that old adage, because it was so much fun for us. I would do it again in a heartbeat. Does it present challenges? Yes. In fact, we had kids that were local to us, to our market, that we were utilizing, that were only available on weekends and evenings and Christmas break and things like that. So it presented scheduling challenges, but from just a pure joy standpoint.
I mean, for me, there are so many moments, but I think because it was the culmination of everything I've studied for, everything
Hmm.
I've, you know, been doing for so long. So one of our shoot days, we we were at a big mega church because we needed a big stage and we needed to be able to project Aria Appleton behind her. And so we had a huge cast. I had like all the children I'd ever worked with from children's theater there. I had sent out dancing choreography videos to these kids days in advance, where I'm hoping that they're watching these YouTube videos of me going, and 5, 6, 7, 8. And so we show up and all these kids are there. They're so excited. They all know their choreography. They know how to mouth the words because, we've pre-recorded the song and they have to sing along to it. And, we're doing this big chorus line sort of dance where we, think a chorus line, but we're quirky about it. And so I've told the kids, bring fun shoes, house shoes, boots, whatever. So we're doing this big chorus line number with all these crazy shoes with kids from ages 7 to, 50 years old, and just putting it all on camera.
Mhm.
And I've got a 1.5-year-old on my hip, and I'm just saying, 5, 6, 7, 8. It just was, that to me was one of those beautiful moments because it was just everything I've worked for
Yeah.
came together that day.
One of my favorite joyful moments was really watching the provision of God through the process for us, because it was a very 5 loaf, 2 fish endeavor, and
Wow.
we were just amazed by when we swallowed that and we were like, okay, great, we're going to have to make this with 5 loaves and 2 fish. That's how God was teaching us how to do something we needed to understand about that principle, that parable. And as soon as we would take a step, some crazy thing would happen, and resources and people and relationships and doors, just stuff started opening for us that was teaching us how to trust, teaching us how to walk, and walking in faith while making art.
Mhm.
And one of my favorite moments, though, was a moment of sheer terror. We were on set with 100 kids and all of our crew, and our DP, who is a wonderful guy, but we had asked too much of him, and he had overcommitted himself.
Mm.
And he would agree. He comes up to us that morning and he says, I can't be here today. I'm going to lose. And he had another job. He's like, I'm about to lose my job.
Oh no.
And it was an awkward circumstance for us. It was like a Christmas break shoot, and several people were off work, but some people weren't, and he had to go, and he just left. And the producers and several friends were standing around, and they all looked at me and they said, what just happened?
Yeah.
Where'd he go? And I said, well, we just lost camera.
Oh.
And the entire camera kit left. And one of our producers, Jason Davidson, was standing there with a friend of his, who's a guy named Dean Davis. He was he's a media arts minister at the Hills Church in North Richland Hills, Texas. And Jason said, wait, what? We've lost camera? Oh no. And the sky is falling for a moment for everybody. And Dean said, what do you need? And we said, we just lost camera. And he said, give me a second. And he went to his car, and he came back in with 2 Sony FS700s,
Nice.
like an angel with 2 wings, walking down the hallway of this school where we were shooting. And I watched him coming in the door, and I had this very spiritually charged, almost existential moment of joy, right? Where it's kind of hard to explain, where you see what appears to be this hopeless situation, and you go, oh no, this is going to be this is all disaster. We are
Right.
at the Red Sea, and the Egyptians are about to pounce, and the sea parted. And then Dean stayed on as our DP for another 50 days. And it was a crazy cool miracle. But things like that happened throughout the entire process, and were so exhilarating, scary at times, but the joy factor that replaces that terror was really, really fun. And I probably have 20 stories like that, but that's one of my favorites.
That's amazing. That's incredible. Wow. When does this come out? Everywhere,
It-
or is it going to be on, what
yeah, it's out.
platforms?
It's
Oh, it's
out
out. It's
on
already out
Prime
everywhere.
Video right now.
Nice,
It's out on
nice.
Prime, and that is our uh, current distribution
Okay.
channel because we've had offers for distribution from some people.
Hmm.
We've had several. None of them were tenable.
Hmm.
Um, some of them were criminal. Um, some of them were okay, but they really weren't going to be able to do much more for us than we could do for ourselves.
Right.
Um, and so we hit a wall in January after kind of walking away from our last offer that we found to be untenable for us. And I looked at her and I said, I think we have to at least begin with self-distribution. I'm not sure why we're being cornered into this position this way, but I think that's probably what we have to do. And of course, this last year and a half, we've been watching all the strikes and all the
Oh, yeah.
tumult in Hollywood and thousands of friends leaving LA and just like something and knowing things are unstable, something is wrong,
Yeah.
something is changing. And so I've described, people will be like, well, what was that distribution offer you got from so and so like? And I'll say, well, it was rabid. It felt rabid,
Hmm.
like they're foaming at the mouth, and this is something's changing, and it's like, well, we can't go that direction. Well, what direction do we go?
Hmm.
You turn around and go, well, if not that, then what? And the Lord's just standing there going, yeah, go over there. And you're like, it's dark. I can't see over there. I don't know how to move that direction. But as soon as we committed to self-distribution, we realized we were um, one of the very last accounts set up with Prime Direct that then is now called Amazon Slate.
Hmm.
And no one can get in. The doors have been closed. Amazon has closed the gate, and
Wow.
um, independent filmmakers cannot load their movies up to Prime Direct anymore as of sometime earlier this year. And we realized we're actually in the door, but the door is closed. We already had the account set up, and so. Uh, but then, of course, we were looking at the marketing of it, going, "Well, how do we market this?"
Right.
That's actually one of the reasons that we kind of decided to go on our own was that some of the distributors, none of the distributors were going to market anything. They were just going to put it
Mm.
in a couple of places. We were going to be left to have to do our own promotion regardless. And so we thought, well, if we're going to have to do the promo regardless,
Right.
why don't we just drive traffic to a single location? And it was funny. It was another test for us because as soon as we came to that conclusion and said, well, we probably need to do this on our own, but with what money are we going to buy marketing? We had felt like we had exhausted most of our EPs and our friends and people that had helped us along the way. We did not feel good going back to ask people for any additional help for the marketing of the project. And but as soon as we made the decision, we looked at each other and said, we've got to do this on our own, and we need to use this platform that we have through Amazon to at least start the process to get the ball
Mhm.
rolling. And the very next day, the door opened for the money to buy some marketing. And so
Awesome.
we
Awesome.
went, that's that moment you go, oh, okay, I get it. I get it, Lord. It's like,
Yeah.
and I don't understand completely, but I
Right.
get it. And I'm just going to keep going that direction. So that's how we've ended up at Prime Video. And the soundtrack is also available at iTunes, Apple Music, and Amazon Music for people that
Amazing.
want to go check that out too.
Amazing. That's incredible. What message do you want, with this film, people, the viewers, to walk away with?
I'm sure Nathan will come up with a better answer because it's a deep, deep one in this relationship. But I would love for people to sit down with their families on like a Friday night and get back to just, a weekly routine where on Friday nights we spend time together, even if we haven't had time throughout the week, and we sit down and we watch a movie together, and then we talk about it. Because a lot
Yeah.
of times, Hollywood will slip in messages that we don't agree with, or we're not ready for our 9-year-old to be introduced to some topics or whatever. And we think it's a kid's movie, but guess what? We're going to talk about this today. And it's, even though I don't like it, I'm okay having conversations with my kid because I get to guide her. And so, sit down, watch this movie, watch Aria Appleton with your family. We made a parents and leaders guide that accompanies the film if you'd like to check it out. It's at GiveSendGo /Aria Appleton. And there's 6 chapters in it. We talk about honoring parents, talk about cyberbullying, talk about dying to self, right? Because we have this little girl who's all about ego and all about self.
Oh, yeah.
And so we have these themes that we talk about, and we have some discussion points that you can talk with your family about. And there's little worksheets that if you have little kids, they can do those worksheets while you talk with your bigs about these topics. So yeah, I would just love for families to come together and enjoy, be entertained, and have conversations together.
I love that. Love that.
Yeah, we also want kids and families to take one of the primary themes of the movie, which Aria sings this song called Make Good. And the challenge in the film is how can we not be necessarily afraid of technology and afraid of social media or afraid of AI or this conversation? How do we not give in to fear about these things, but how do we take them for the kingdom? How do you go and do good with those things and allow those things to be a blessing and ensure that that it's used for good? So that's another strong theme we'd like parents to consider with their kids, and we're working on a document that's got options for parents and suggestions around what we're calling a Make Good challenge for families that will accompany that leader's guide, and that's going to try to stimulate some creative thinking around the conversation, because there's a lot of families that are scared of tech and they're worried.
Yeah.
They feel guilty sometimes. They feel ashamed, and one of the worst things we can do to one another in that conversation is make families feel ashamed about what they're doing or not doing with that. Do some people need to have a 30-day detox? Probably, but and detox from tech in their homes. Maybe they need to do that, but I think it'd be more productive for people to not have an anti approach to that, but let's think proactively about how can we use tech for good, and obviously protect our kids from all the things they need to be protected from. But how do we teach the kids to use something for good? I mean, a chainsaw could be used for evil, but if we use it, you learn how to use it properly and for its purpose, we can cut down a forest and build homes. It's
Bad.
so everything has a potential for evil, but how do we take that and make it potential for good? And so that's what I'm hoping, at least for on the family side. I hope from a filmmaking side and a storytelling side that we inspire people who are writing and they want to write in the faith space or the family space or the kid space or whatever. They want to write in that. I'm hoping that what we've written will inspire them to think more out of the box, and that they will start to be more courageous about like parabolic storytelling, like Jesus's parables. It sounds risky to say this, but and I hope people understand the heart of what I mean when I say this. But a parable is a piece of fiction. It's just fiction. It's it might as well be a myth or a piece of lore or Aesop's fables, right? It's just a story. When Jesus was telling stories about the camel going through the eye of a needle, is that a literal story? Well, no, it's a piece of interesting fiction that teaches a principle. It teaches an idea. It teaches a concept. And so I'm hopeful what people will see our film and go, oh, there's some allegory there, there's some parable there, there's a richness there that can be discussed and translated, and families can talk about it. Um, and so I'm hoping maybe what we're doing will inspire that space a little bit to get out of the box.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It did. I enjoyed it. I definitely enjoyed it. It was really fun. I love the ending. The song was really cute. The number of uh this little light of mine. I was like, I like that. That's cool. Um
Thanks.
I have a fun question. I love asking every guest this question, and there is no wrong answer. But the three levels of influence: money, power, and respect. If you could choose only one of those things, which one, if you could, which one would you choose and why?
Okay, so I'll go first so that, Nathan can end it because again, I like his answers better than I ever like mine. But so for me, it's respect because if
Mhm.
I was doing anything for money, I would have picked a different career, right? Like,
Mm,
I don't know of very many people that choose to go into the arts because they think they'll get rich. Um, I mean, some people do that, but I don't think they succeed necessarily. It's a really hard business to go into, the creative
mhm.
space. Um, it's so hard. And so I didn't do this because I want money. And I do not like power at all. So that is
Mm,
not me. But respect really is. And I think a lot of things that I do out of fear is because of how much I do crave respect.
mm,
Actually being bold about my faith. For so long I've not spoken out about it a lot because, in the theater world, I
yeah,
mean, it's almost like taboo to speak about that. So I've tried to be braver in these last few years about speaking out about what do I believe and what do I think and putting this movie out there, which is my heart and soul.
yeah,
I am inside my head, I'm hilarious. I love the Lord and I love the arts. It's me on a platter there. And so putting it out there for people to look at, I know
yeah,
not everyone's going to love it, and that's terrifying. So
yeah.
for me, it really is respect.
It's a great answer.
Um, my strong-willed child, that is, the heart and soul, the core of me, would choose power.
Hmm.
Uh, I know that. My wife's laughing. She's laughing. Um, I'm being vulnerably honest here. This is
I
this
love
is
it.
true.
This is a
That's a
safe space.
scary. I mean, think about it. It's a scary answer. It's like, no, I will take the ring of power and I will put it on, and I will rule the world. That was my, 3 to 5 year old self that was shaking my fist in my mother's face. My mom tells these stories about how awful I was as a child, and compared to my older brother who was a very like amiable kid, but I was the one who was feisty and put up a major fight. And I do think that's kind of uh the honest answer is what would I choose. But
Hmm.
um why would I choose that? I think influence is probably the reason that I would choose it today,
Hmm.
to be able, and I think it's inherent in the heart of the story too. We're kind of like, how do you make good? And the concept of taking something meant for evil and turning it to use it for good. Power is the same thing. Power can be used for good if wielded with wisdom.
Right.
And that's everything from King Solomon to King David to any of the kings and prophets who did good and wielded what God gave them. I think that's what I would choose. I also think that scripturally, we're not supposed to be trying to force anything to happen.
Hmm.
When we get caught up in that space and we try to push and force things to happen, God resists us. He pushes back, and uh, but the scripture, His divine power has given us everything we need
Hmm.
for life and godliness. Is power in the light, and that's the power I seek. That's the power I kind of fight to locate from time to time, and
Hmm.
that's that momentum that we feel when we're stepping in faith and Dean Davis is walking down the hallway with two cameras uh, to work a miracle for us. That kind of faith meets power meets God's provision, and that's really another reason why. Well, it's something I'm looking for on a daily basis. Like, where is that?
Yeah.
Because it's kind of elusive at times, and so I think I'm looking for that power more so than I want to control people. I really don't. But uh, anyway, that's my thoughts on that.
I love that. That's very well said. Um, you're on top of everything you're doing, you're working on a book, right? Tell us about that. I mean, if you can share a little bit.
Yeah, sure. Well, that's a slightly different topic. I would love to come back someday and really give you the full
Oh
expose
yeah,
on that. But
definitely.
the book is I along the across the last 15 years, I was and in seasons when I wasn't sure that I was going to be making movies, um, I wasn't doing plan B, but I was just seeking additional information, and I was self-educating. And it's like anything, you find a hobby that you're interested in, and you just get obsessed with it for a little while, and you do some additional education in that space out of sheer interest.
Hmm.
I had a friend, he's one of my best buds, who kind of fell down the chiropractic rabbit hole about 20 years ago, and he invited me in to some degree. He would bring home workshop materials from his studies, and he would say, "Hey, you need to learn how to do what I'm doing." And he and I went to seminary together years ago, and so we have a ministry missions background in our education, and we have a lot to talk about from theologically, and we're best buds. So when he would bring something to me that was fascinating to him, of course I'd take interest in it for a minute. I'd go, well, what has Charles found that I need to uh, look into as well? And so I started looking into it, humoring what he was doing,
Hmm.
and I was doing it for reasons of my own health, because I had a lot of allergy problems and physical problems and things I didn't really understand at the time. And through some of the research that he was doing and his study, and then bringing that to me, and then I would go through those materials. Well, I started having these major health breakthroughs for myself, and making major discoveries that changed me completely. And so I started sharing that with family and friends, and I eventually went for certifications in these areas of what are considered neo-chiropractic, or biofeedback based neurological reprogramming. And it sounds kind of complex, but I just started taking interest in it. It was a sidecar for a long time, but then I just started seeing such incredible results with people. And I never really understood how what I was doing as a creative, or as an actor, dovetailed or connected to what I was doing there. They were just two very different things to me.
Hmm.
I was over in the creative space doing what I was doing, and then at times I was at a workshop with doctors learning how to do some sort of table adjustment with a bunch of chiropractors. And that seems disparate, right? You're like, how do these two things go together? But then I was on a we at my wife and I co-direct Fort Worth Actors Studio, which we started about 10 years ago, about the time that the movie was conceived.
Nice.
And we bring in celebrity guest workshop instructors, and we bring in local teachers, and one of our celebrity guest instructors who came through took interest in what we were doing. And one day he said, "Hey, are you watching The Chosen?" And I said, "Well, sort of, not really. Um, I appreciate it." And he said, "Well, why aren't you?" Why? I said, "Well, I'm having trouble. The willing suspension of disbelief factor is lost on me, because I designed the village and the
Mm.
gardens where
Hmm.
they shot all of that."
Hmm.
And he said, "You did? What? That's here in Dallas?" I said, "Well, it's outside Fort Worth." I said, "Let me take you over there. I'll show it to you." And I Tammy Lane's wonderful, and I have a kind of the keys to the kingdom over there. I can just show up, and everybody knows who I am, and they just they just let me walk in, and and so I took him over there, and we had a really fun day looking around. And on the way home, he started confessing to me that he was having what amounts to CPTSD or PTSD type symptom pattern, and that despite the fact that he'd done multiple huge Hollywood movies and TV series, and he's fairly well known, despite all of that, he was at a position where he felt like he was going to have to retire. And he couldn't get his heart rate up, and he couldn't emote. If he started to emote, he'd have a panic attack. And it was kind of pitiful. He'd put on quite a bit of weight. He was in a bad way, and he had sought everything from help from priests and pastors to the medical establishment and the mental health establishment.
Wow.
He just kind of run aground, and he starts confessing that to me in the car on the way home, and I'm sitting there listening, and it was that one of those moments where the Lord's tapping me on the shoulder, and he's going, testing, is this thing on? Are you listening right now? And I went, oh, wait a minute. And a decade of study landed on me like a ton of bricks in relation to what he was struggling with. And it hit me, and I went, oh, I understand why you're sick. And he said, wait, what? And I said, I know I'm an unlikely conduit to get this information. I said, but you don't know my entire educational background. I said, would you humor me and let me share something with you? And he was like, of course. I had him trapped in a car for an hour. and so I share what I thought was going on with him. And he said, what do you think my problem is? And I said, well, it's the characters. I said, I said, you are fine. I said, you're okay. You've dealt with your own trauma, and you've gotten humble before God, and you're okay. I said, but they're not. I said, how many characters have you played that had lived through high stakes situations? They were all, some of them were running from the law. Some of them were the law. They're villains and bad guys. And that's usually who he plays. And he said, well, most of them are. I said, how many of them died on screen? He said, several of them. And
Wow.
I said, yeah, they're the problem, and they need Jesus. I said, we need to deal with them. And so that was the impetus for a discovery. It was a discovery about how character development and emotional trauma for artists and actors, and it's not exclusive to actors, but it's a very real problem for them, creates an emotional dysregulation issue.
Right.
And in worst case scenarios, creates PTSD or CPTSD type symptoms. And it's not theirs. It's like they have a partitioned hard drive and on their brain, and they're okay, but these characters are not. And and their experience playing these characters and emoting as these characters all gets archived in the brain, in the body, and creates a cascade of biochemical problems and sympathetic nervous system problems, and so that's what the book is about. The book is about the discovery. When I went back to Dr. Roland Phillips, who's one of my mentors in Phoenix, and I explained what was happening with my actor bud, Dr. Phillips put his hands up next to the side of his head, and he went like his head was exploding. And he said, dude, I don't think anybody has ever disclosed. I don't think anybody's talked about this. He said, and you have to write it. It's a book. You're going to write it. And I said, wait, hold up. I said, I don't know about that. And he said, who else teaches a Stanislavski course and understands what you know about neurology and anatomy and and the treatment of all of this treatment of this stuff. He said, nobody knows you're the guy. He was like, it's your thing. And so I prayed about it for about a year, and the book, which is called Acting Dangerously, Emotional Memory and PTSD. That's the name of the book, and it's not quite finished. I'm still banging out portions of it, but I hope to have it done by the end of the year. And
Awesome.
and then I've also started recording some podcasts with actors who are just talking about that subject.
Oh,
And
amazing. Amazing.
the podcast is called Acting Dangerously, and I already have an Instagram set up for that,
Awesome.
and a Facebook page and stuff like that. So I'm gonna just slowly start leaking some of that information out here later this year.
Awesome. Well, congrats on that. That's exciting.
Yeah. Oh, well, and let me tell you this: a button on why would you write a book about a discovery? Well, this particular actor, I said, come see me. I said, I'll pray with you, and then let me work on you. And he said, let me pray about it. Let me think about it. 3 days later, he showed up at the studio, and I'll pop up at the studio occasionally with like a chiropractic table or massage table, and it happened to be up that day. I'd had a client that day or something, and he burst through the door that day, and he face planted on my table, and he said, "I'm ready." He was having a really bad day. And so I prayed with him, and I worked on him, and he'd been super symptomatic for over a year. He was miserable.
Wow.
And I worked on him for about 40 minutes. And after that, he was symptom free. He was symptom
Wow.
free for 1 year. I got a ping about a year later. It was an evening, it was late. And I got a tap on the shoulder, and it was like, God was going, "Hey, call him." And I'm like, "What? I don't call him. Call him." And I called him. I said, "Are you okay?" He said, "No, I'm having a panic attack." And that was 1 year later, but he'd had a symptom-free year.
Wow.
I did some work with him over the phone, prayed with him, and that left him. And he's working today, and he's doing very well.
That's great.
And so not only did we make a little connection between what we were doing in our space, but we tied it to the arts community in a way that I think is going to be pretty impactful when we start talking about it with people, because I know that it affects a lot more people than are aware. They're not even
Yeah.
aware why they're sick or why they're having some issues. So that'll come down the road. And I appreciate you asking me about it, because I'm not really talking about it very much yet.
Hey, we got the exclusive. So
Yeah,
I'm very happy.
that's awesome. Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. Really, last question. What advice would you give to, that little girl, that little boy, anyone that wants to get into this really interesting business called entertainment?
Well, I'd say if there's anything else that you love, do that because
Mhm.
it's hard. But if this is it, if this is what you just have to do it, and math's not your thing, and so this is it, and you are passionate about it, and you dream about it, you eat it, then study, be
Yeah.
humble. And when I was in college, my professors were always like, it's all about connections. And me being 18, I was like, sure, whatever. No, it is. It's all about connections. And so just staying humble and finding really good mentors
Yeah.
and just, go if you're into film, go to film festivals. Film
Mhm.
festivals, if you're a Christian, go to the Christian film festivals. If you're not a Christian, go to the not ones. And connect. And if you've already gone through the trouble of buying that ticket and going to that film festival, then even if you're an introvert and you're shy, just get over it for a
Mhm.
day and put yourself out there and make those connections because it really is about who you know.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, my advice to young people is always be careful, and make sure you go with friends. One of the themes in our story is about the dangers of the fraud and scam scenario online.
Mhm.
The movie industry is terribly fraught with scams and grifters and people who would just take people for their money and make lots of promises, but that they can't deliver on. And for several years, one of the primary human trafficking scams was a runway model scam.
Wow.
And, runway models, they, and then you end up producing the show. Like they'll charge you $2,500 for your local show and $10,000 for the LA thing. And then, and then they claim that they're shipping you off to Paris, but those girls didn't end up in Paris. And so I always tell young people to be really careful, and understand that where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there's disorder and every evil thing, and that God disciplines the kids that he loves. And so if you are run amok, he will use the industry to discipline you. He'll use the industry to spank your hiney. And so turn your heart to him and get humble before him. Like Delitha said, stay humble. People ask me all the time, how did you get into all the stuff that you're involved in, and how did you get this project and work with this person and do this? And I'm like, I learned when I was from my parents, years ago when I was a kid. I embraced the "here am I, send me, Lord" kind of idea. And anything that I've ever done that people think is cool came because I did that.
Yeah.
And I stepped back, and I stepped away from me, even though I want certain things. I have desires and ambition. I stepped away from that stuff and said, okay, Lord, putting me aside, what do you want? Where do you need me to be? What do you want me to plug into? And he would open the door. And so, being humble before God and just asking God to plug you in somewhere is probably the safest and best piece of advice I can give to young people.
Absolutely. Wonderful advice. Thank you so much for coming on. Where can people find you guys on social media to follow everything you have going on?
Well, if you go to ariaappleton.com, that's ARIA, Apple, TON.com, you can find all our links out. But we are definitely on Instagram, and we're on Facebook, and we're on TikTok.
Yeah, the film is at Aria Appleton in many social media sites, and at Grafted Studios on YouTube. That's GRAF as in Frank, graftedstudios.com, or Grafted Studios on YouTube rather. And I'm at Nathan D. Myers everywhere if people want to track with me, and at Acting Dangerously as well on Instagram is new. And then of course the movie is available on Prime Video. Go out and check it out, rent it or VOD it.
Yay. Well, congratulations, and thank you so much for this wonderful conversation. Very insightful. I felt like I was, thank you for blessing this show today. So thank you for coming on.
Well, it's a blessing to us. Thank you for the opportunity to be on here with you, and we love what you're doing and encourage. Aren't you? You have some big things happening right away, right?
I do. I actually just released. Speaking of church, I did an audio series called Church Hurt, and it was inspired by a friend of mine who committed suicide last year due to a situation with church. And I was, it kind of prompted me to make a project about people who've been church hurt. But the through line is that, God's never been the problem, but people. So, at the end of the day, it's one of those 6-part series. It's an audio series. And I just put it out. I'm very happy about it, and I think it's going to bless and heal a lot of people who's had church wounds.
Yeah.
So
that's awesome. That's great. That sounds useful. So and beneficial. So, but thank you for the opportunity to be here with you. We'll pray God keeps blessing what you're doing.
Thank you so much, and thank you all for listening. And always remember to live, love, laugh. We'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.